The door slammed behind Yuna so hard that her little daughter flinched. For a moment, neither of them moved. Cold soul wind swept across the stone steps, lifting Yuna's loose hair and carrying the faint sound of laughter from inside the house she had called home for 6 years. Then the door opened again. Madame Seo stood there, perfectly dressed, her expression harder than the winter air. Take your things and go. You have no place in this family anymore. Yuna tightened her arms around her daughter. Please, it's freezing outside. Let me stay until morning. Madame Seo's eyes moved from Yuna's worn coat to the child's frightened face. You should have thought about that before becoming a burden. A suitcase landed on the pavement. Then another. Yuna stared at them, unable to understand how 6 years of marriage could be reduced to 2 bags sitting beside her feet. Behind Madame Seo, Yuna saw her husband, June. He stood in the hallway, silent. Their eyes met. Yuna waited for him to say anything. He looked away. That hurt more than the shouting. She swallowed the tears burning behind her eyes and picked up the smaller suitcase. Her daughter slipped her tiny hand into Yuna's free hand. Mommy, where are we going? Yuna forced a smile she did not feel. Somewhere safe. The door closed again. This time, it locked. Yuna walked down the long driveway beneath the glowing security lights, carrying everything she had left of her old life. She did not know where they would sleep. She did not know how she would feed her daughter tomorrow. And she certainly did not know that before another sunrise, someone would arrive looking for her. Someone carrying an envelope that would turn her entire life upside down. And nobody in that house knew why. Because the woman standing on that cold street believed she had just lost everything. She had no idea that somewhere in Gangnam, a fortune had already been waiting for her. Yuna kept walking until the lights of the CEO residence disappeared behind the trees. Her daughter, Mina, stumbled beside her, dragging a pink backpack that looked heavy. Yuna stopped beneath the awning of a closed convenience store and knelt in front of her. Are you cold? Mina nodded. Yuna removed her scarf and wrapped it around the child. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Mina looked into her mother's eyes. Did Grandma make us leave because I was bad? The question broke something inside Yuna. No, she whispered. You did nothing wrong. Neither had Yuna. 6 years earlier, she had entered the Seo family with nothing except a university degree, a gentle heart, and hope of building a life with June. His family had welcomed her politely, but never warmly. Madame Seo had made the difference clear from the beginning. You married into this family, she often reminded Yuna. Never forget where you came from. Yuna had tried everything to earn her place. She cooked, managed the household, cared for June when he was sick, and raised Mina while enduring insults. But the more she sacrificed, the less they seemed to value her. When June became successful, Madame Seo claimed Yuna had contributed nothing. When Mina was born, she complained that the child was a responsibility. And whenever Yuna tried to speak, June told her to remain patient. Tonight, patience had ended. Yuna found a room above a restaurant. The owner accepted the last cash in her purse. Inside, the room smelled of detergent and old wood. Mina fell asleep immediately. Yuna sat beside the window, staring at the dark city. She finally allowed herself to cry. She had no family to call, no savings, no home. But before dawn, a black sedan stopped across the street. An elderly man stepped out, holding a sealed envelope. He looked toward Yuna's window. He had been searching for her. Stranger with an envelope. Yuna woke before sunrise to Mina coughing softly. Then she saw the unfamiliar ceiling, the suitcase beside the wall, and reality returned immediately. She had been thrown out. Yuna washed her face and divided the last piece of bread between herself and Mina. She promised they would find a better place soon, although she had no idea how. When they stepped outside, the elderly man from the black sedan was waiting. He stood beside the car in a charcoal coat, holding a brown leather folder. Mrs. Han? Yuna stopped. Yes? My name is Kang Min Seok. I'm an attorney. Her expression tightened. If you came from the Seo family, please tell them I have nothing left to give them. Mr. Kang shook his head. I didn't come from your husband's family. He looked at Mina, then back at Yuna. I came because of an inheritance. Yuna stared at him. An inheritance? There has been a mistake, she said quietly. I don't have wealthy relatives. I understand why you think that. He opened the folder. There is a woman named Han Yun-hee. She died several weeks ago. Her estate has been under private administration for years. Yuna frowned. I've never heard that name. Mr. Kang studied her face carefully. That is exactly what I expected you to say. Then he placed a sealed envelope into Yuna's trembling hands. Inside is a notice naming you as the beneficiary of a substantial estate. Yuna looked at the envelope. Why me? That, Mr. Kang replied, is what we need to discover. Mina tugged at her mother's coat. Mommy, are we rich now? Yuna almost smiled, but fear stopped her. After the previous night, trusting a stranger felt impossible. You don't have to trust me yet, Mr. Kang said. Just read the documents. Yuna closed her fingers around the envelope. She had no idea that opening it would reveal a name she had never expected and a property worth more than anything she had ever imagined. The inheritance nobody expected. Yuna stared at the envelope for several seconds before finally breaking the seal. The first page contained her full name. The second contained legal language she barely understood. Then she saw the property address. Her eyes stopped. Gangnam. She looked at Mr. Kang. What does this mean? He calmly placed another document on the table. It means that you have been named the primary beneficiary of the Han Yun-hee estate. Yuna shook her head. There must be some mistake. There isn't. Mr. Kang turned the document toward her. The estate included a private residence in one of the most expensive areas of Seoul. According to the latest valuation, the property and surrounding assets were worth approximately $40 million. Yuna felt the room become strangely quiet. 40 million? Mr. Kang nodded. Mina's eyes widened. Mommy, is that a lot? Yuna could barely answer. She had spent the previous night calculating whether she could afford breakfast. Now a stranger was telling her that she might own a $40 million mansion. But something bothered her. Why would someone I have never met leave this to me? Mr. Kang hesitated. That question has remained unanswered for a long time. Then why are you giving it to me now? Because the legal conditions attached to the estate have finally been triggered. He explained that the inheritance could not be finalized through paperwork alone. Yuna had to personally visit the property and acknowledge the estate. And if I refuse, then the process stops. Yuna looked toward Mina. She wanted safety, not wealth. Still, there was something about the envelope that felt strangely deliberate. Mr. Kang handed her one final key. This belongs to the mansion. Yuna held it in her palm. For years, Madame Seo had made her feel worthless. Yet someone, somewhere, had apparently spent years preparing a fortune in her name. The question was no longer whether the inheritance was real. It was why someone had chosen her, and why Mr. Kang looked worried when he said, "You should be very careful about who learns that you have it." The mansion behind the gates. By late afternoon, Yuna stood before two enormous iron gates in Gangnam, staring at the address written on the legal documents. She almost expected someone to tell her there had been a mistake. Beyond the gates stood a sprawling mansion surrounded by carefully trimmed trees, stone pathways, and tall glass windows reflecting the fading Seoul sunlight. It looked less like a home and more like a private estate hidden inside the city. Mina squeezed her mother's hand. "Mommy, do we really live here?" Yuna swallowed. "I don't know yet." Mr. Kang entered the security code. The gates slowly opened. As Yuna walked through them, an unfamiliar feeling settled over her. She had spent years being told that she did not belong in wealthy places. Yet every document said this place might belong to her. The front doors opened without resistance. Inside, the air smelled faintly of polished wood and old flowers. Everything was spotless. A crystal chandelier hung above the marble entrance. Paintings covered the walls, and expensive furniture stood beneath white protective sheets. There was no dust, no sign that the mansion had been abandoned. Yuna turned toward Mr. Kang. "Who has been taking care of this place?" Before he could answer, a voice came from the hallway. "I have." An elderly caretaker stepped into the light. His name was Mr. Park. He looked at Yuna for several seconds, and something changed in his expression. "You look exactly like her." Yuna frowned. "Like who?" Mr. Park did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward Mina. Then he whispered, "She said you would come with a child." A chill passed through Yuna. How could she know that? Mr. Park lowered his eyes. "She left instructions." Yuna walked deeper into the mansion. Then Mina suddenly stopped. Mommy, she was staring at a photograph hanging on the wall. Yuna followed her gaze. The photograph showed a beautiful woman standing beside the mansion. Many years earlier, Yuna's heart began beating faster. She had never seen the woman before, yet something about her eyes felt strangely familiar. And beneath the photograph was a small brass plaque carrying two words, Han Yun-hee. Yuna slowly reached toward it. For the first time, she wondered whether this mansion had been waiting for her long before she knew it existed. Someone has been waiting. Yuna could not take her eyes off the photograph. The woman in it had the same gentle eyes she remembered from old pictures of her father. But Yuna had never heard her father mention anyone named Yun-hee. Mr. Park, she said quietly. How did she know about me? The caretaker looked toward Mr. Kang before answering. Because she had been watching your life for years. Yuna stepped back. Watching me? Not in the way you think. Mr. Park disappeared into a nearby study and returned carrying a small wooden box. The box was old, but carefully preserved. He placed it in Yuna's hands. She ordered me to give you this only after you entered the house. Yuna opened the lid. Inside were several handwritten letters, a silver pendant, and a small brass key. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the first letter. The handwriting was elegant. The message was short. If you are reading this, then they finally failed to keep you away. Yuna's breath caught. Who are they? Mr. Park remained silent. She opened another letter. This one mentioned her father, not by accident. It described a promise made decades earlier. A promise involving money, family, and a secret that had apparently survived long after the people who created it were gone. Yuna looked at Mr. Kang. Why didn't you tell me about this? I didn't know everything. That answer frightened her more than any explanation could have. Then Mr. Park pointed toward the second floor. There is one room you must not enter yet. Yuna looked up. Why? Because Mrs. Han wanted you to understand the truth before opening it. Yuna tightened her grip around the letters. For the first time, the mansion no longer felt like a miracle. It felt like a carefully sealed story. And someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to make sure. Yuna became the person who would finally uncover it. Outside the gates, a dark vehicle slowly passed the property. Inside it, someone was watching the mansion. And when the vehicle disappeared into traffic, Yuna had no idea that news of her arrival had already reached the one person who feared this inheritance most. Madam CEO. Madam CEO's desperate warning. Madam CEO arrived before sunset. Her black sedan stopped outside the mansion gates, and moments later she entered the property without waiting for permission. Yuna was standing in the foyer when she saw her. For the first time, Madam CEO looked frightened. Not angry, frightened. What are you doing here? She demanded. Yuna held the envelope against her chest. I could ask you the same thing. Madam CEO's eyes moved around the mansion. She stared at the staircase, then at the portrait of Yun-hee. Her face suddenly lost its color. You need to leave this place. Yuna almost laughed. Yesterday, you told me I had no home. Today, you're telling me where I can live? This is not a game. I know. Madam CEO stepped closer. You don't understand what you've inherited. Then explain it. Silence. Yuna watched her carefully. Madam CEO had spent years treating her like someone insignificant. Yet now she was standing inside Yuna's new home, desperately trying to control what happened next. How do you know this house? Yuna asked. Madam CEO looked away. I know enough. Have you been here before? No. The answer came too quickly. Yuna noticed. So did Mr. Kang. Madam CEO's eyes returned to the portrait. You should never have been given this. Why? Because some things are dangerous when they belong to the wrong person. Yuna's voice hardened. And who is the wrong person? Madam CEO said nothing. Then she reached into her handbag and pulled out an old photograph. She placed it on the table. Yuna picked it up. Her father was standing beside Yun-hee, and beside them was a much younger Madam CEO. Yuna's heart stopped. You knew her. Madam CEO's expression changed. I knew enough to understand that she destroyed lives. Whose? Madam CEO turned toward the door. Before leaving, she looked back at Yuna. If you open every door in this house, You may discover something you cannot survive knowing. The door closed. Yuna stared at the photograph. One question now burned through her mind. What had Madame Seo been hiding all these years? And why was she suddenly terrified that Yuna might find it? The locked room. Yuna waited until Madame Seo's car disappeared beyond the gates. Then she returned to the study and spread the old photograph across the desk. Her father stood beside Yoonhee, and beside them was Madame Seo. Three people connected by a history nobody had ever told Yuna about. She opened the wooden box again. The small brass key rested beneath the letters. Yuna remembered Mr. Park's warning. There was one room she was not supposed to enter yet. That was exactly the room she needed to find. She climbed the stairs slowly, following a narrow hallway toward the oldest part of the mansion. At the end stood a dark wooden door with a brass lock. Her hand trembled as she inserted the key. It turned. The door opened with a soft click. Inside was a small private office. Unlike the rest of the mansion, this room had not been preserved for appearance. Files covered the shelves. Old financial records filled cabinets. A desk stood beneath a window overlooking the garden. Yuna opened the first drawer. Inside was a folder with her father's name. Her breath caught. She opened it. There were bank records, letters, property documents, and photographs. Then she found something that made her sit down. A document showed that her father had once been involved in a major business arrangement with Yoonhee. But another document was even more disturbing. It contained the name of Madame Seo. Yuna read the pages twice. The records suggested that money had been moved through several private accounts years before she married June. Someone had tried to conceal those transactions. Then she found a handwritten note from Yoonhee. Yuna must never be allowed to learn the truth until she is protected from the Seo family. Yuna's hands began shaking. Why had Yoonhee been protecting her? And what had Madame Seo done? A sound suddenly came from downstairs. Yuna froze. Someone had entered the mansion. She quietly closed the file and stepped away from the desk. Footsteps moved across the marble floor. Slowly, carefully. Whoever had entered knew exactly where they were going. Yuna reached for the phone. Then the footsteps stopped outside the locked room. The handle began to turn. The truth behind the inheritance. The door opened only an inch before Mr. Park's voice echoed from the hallway. Who's there? The footsteps stopped. A moment later, the sound of hurried movement came from downstairs. By the time Yuna reached the foyer, the intruder was gone. But something had been left behind. A black leather glove lay near the back entrance. Yuna stared at it. Someone had entered the mansion looking for something. Mr. Kang arrived shortly afterward, and Yuna showed him the documents from the hidden office. His expression became serious. These records explain why Yoonhee chose you. Yuna looked at him. Then tell me everything. Mr. Kang finally revealed what he had discovered during years of managing the estate. Yoonhee had once been involved in a successful property business with Yuna's father. Together, they had built assets that later became extremely valuable. But after a dispute involving several members of the Seo family, money disappeared, documents were altered, and Yuna's father was blamed for financial wrongdoing he had not committed. Yoonhee had spent years gathering evidence. Before her death, she placed the most valuable assets under legal protection and named Yuna as their eventual beneficiary. She believed the Seo family would try to control you, Mr. Kang explained. Yuna felt tears fill her eyes. My father never told me any of this. He may have been trying to protect you. Then Mr. Kang showed her one final document. It contained a clause stating that the inheritance would remain hidden until Yuna was legally independent of the Seo family's control. Yuna suddenly understood. Madame Seo throwing her out had not destroyed her future. It had accidentally triggered it. The moment she was separated from the family, the final condition of the inheritance became active. Yuna stared at the mansion through the window. The house was not merely worth $40 million. It represented decades of secrets, sacrifice, and protection. But there was still one problem. The documents suggested that Madame Seo had known about the inheritance for years. And if she knew the estate had finally transferred to Yuna, she would not simply walk away. Mr. Kang closed the folder. We need to prepare for what comes next. Yuna looked toward the gates. She no longer felt like the frightened woman who had stood outside in the cold. Someone had spent years protecting her. Now it was her turn to protect the truth. The family's last move. The following morning, Yuna received a message from June. We need to talk. Please come home. She stared at the words for nearly a minute. Home. The word felt strangely empty now. Before she could respond, another message arrived. Mother regrets what happened. We can fix this. Yuna almost laughed. 2 days earlier, Madame Seo had thrown her into the street without a second thought. Now they wanted to fix everything. She agreed to meet them at a quiet private office in Gangnam. June arrived first. He looked exhausted. I didn't know what mother was planning, he said. Yuna looked at him calmly. You watched her throw me out. I was afraid. Of her? June lowered his eyes. Of losing my family. Yuna felt something inside her finally go quiet. For years, she had waited for him to choose her. Now she understood that he never had. Madame Seo entered the room carrying a folder. She placed it in front of Yuna. Sign this, and we can avoid a public dispute. Yuna opened it. The document would surrender several of her rights connected to the estate. You want me to give up the mansion? We are offering you a generous settlement. Yuna looked at her. Yesterday I was worthless. Today you're offering me money to disappear. Madame Seo's expression hardened. You have no idea what you're involved in. I know enough. Then Yuna placed the papers back on the table. I won't sign. Madame Seo leaned forward. You should think carefully. I have. Yuna stood. I spent 6 years trying to earn your respect. I won't spend another minute begging for it. She walked out. But outside the building, Mr. Kang was waiting. He had news. The legal team had discovered evidence that someone had attempted to access the mansion's restricted files, and security footage showed the same vehicle near the property the previous night. The family wasn't trying to negotiate anymore. They were running out of time. And so was Yuna. Because if the hidden documents disappeared before the estate hearing, proving the truth would become much harder. For the first time, Yuna realized that this was no longer about money. It was about who would control the story of what had happened years ago, and she was determined to make sure the truth survived. The reveal that changes everything. The estate hearing began 3 days later. Yuna entered the conference room wearing a simple dark suit. She had never felt comfortable in rooms like this, but today she walked differently. She was no longer asking permission to belong. She was there because the law recognized her rights. Across the table sat Madame Seo and June. Madame Seo appeared confident, but Yuna noticed her hands were tightly clasped. Mr. Kang placed the original estate documents before the legal panel. Then he presented the evidence recovered from Yoonhee's private office. The room became silent. The final sealed document was opened. It contained Yoonhee's personal statement. She explained that years earlier, Yuna's father had discovered financial irregularities involving people close to the Seo family. When he refused to participate, pressure was placed on him. Yoonhee had intervened. She protected the assets and created the estate so that Yuna could eventually receive what had been preserved for her. Then came the sentence that changed everything. Yoonhee had specifically named Yuna as beneficiary because she believed Yuna would never be safe while under the Seo family's financial control. Yuna's eyes filled with tears. All those years, she had believed she was simply unwanted. Now she understood something different. Someone had known her value before she ever recognized it herself. The legal panel confirmed that the mansion and associated assets had been transferred according to the estate's original instructions. Madame Seo suddenly stood. This is impossible. Mr. Kang calmly produced another document. It showed that Madame Seo had previously attempted to obtain information about the estate through unauthorized channels. Her face went pale. June looked at his mother. You knew? Madame Seo said nothing. For once, she had no insult ready, no threat, no explanation. Yuna looked across the table at the woman who had thrown her out into the cold. She could have demanded revenge. Instead, she simply said, You told me I had no place in your family. She paused. Maybe you were right. Madame Seo looked at her. But I never needed your family to have a place in this world. The hearing ended with Yuna's ownership confirmed. The woman who had walked away carrying 2 suitcases now possessed a future worth millions. But the greatest thing she had inherited was not the mansion. It was the truth. She finally had a home. 6 months later, the mansion felt completely different. The heavy silence that once filled its rooms had disappeared. Sunlight poured through the tall windows each morning, while Mina ran through the garden laughing. Yuna had changed almost nothing about the exterior. She wanted to preserve the history of the place. But inside, she created something the mansion had never truly had before. A home. She kept Yoonhee's photograph in the main hallway, not as a reminder of wealth, but as a reminder of the woman who had protected her when Yuna didn't even know she needed protection. Mr. Kang continued managing the estate, while Yuna carefully invested part of the inheritance and established a foundation supporting single parents facing sudden financial hardship. She knew what it felt like to have nowhere to go. She never wanted another mother to feel that same fear. June eventually sent her a letter. He apologized. Yuna read it once and placed it in a drawer. She did not hate him, but forgiveness did not mean returning to the life that had broken her. As for Madam CEO, the legal consequences of the family's financial dealings continued. The woman who had once controlled every room she entered no longer controlled Yuna's life. One evening, Yuna stood at the mansion's front entrance with Mina beside her. The same doorway where she had once imagined herself being rejected was now glowing beneath the warm evening lights. Mina looked up. "Mommy, are you happy now?" Yuna smiled. "Yes, because we're rich." Yuna shook her head. "No, because we're free." Mina slipped her hand into hers. Together they walked through the doors. Yuna stopped for a moment and looked back at the driveway. She remembered the cold night, the suitcases, the tears, the silence of the husband who had refused to defend her. At the time, she thought being thrown out was the worst thing that had ever happened to her. Now she understood. Sometimes the door that closes behind you is the same door that forces you toward the life you were meant to find. Yuna had entered that mansion believing she had inherited $40 million. But what she truly inherited was something far more valuable. A future chosen by her. A home no one could take away. And the courage to finally understand that her worth had never depended on the people who refused to see it.